Shalom and welcome to this edition of Revealing the Truth, where we cover the headlines, the heartlines, and biblical truth. I'm your host, the Reverend Rabbi Eric Walker. Is your life tied up in knots? Knots like you're not good enough, or you're not worthy, or you're just not. Our next guest knows about the struggle with all those knots and more. Carolanne Miljavac is Southern raised, Jesus saved, barely sane author, speaker, and social media goofball. She's married to a lucky man and is the mother of three sweet, loving, kind little girls who only whine every now and then. Poverty and abuse were tough to overcome, but it was a crushing loss of her 7-year-old niece to cancer that finally humbled her enough to listen to God when He spoke into her shattered heart. Give it up. Without the chains of fear and insecurity, she followed her Spirit's instruction to speak freely. She now has over 100 million video views and nearly 500,000 social media followers. Her purpose in life is to spread love and joy without sacrificing honesty and truth. She believes we all have a need to be in a story that needs to be told. Grief taught her gratitude, pain gave her purpose, and loss revealed true love. With faith, she found audacity, and her mission is to give you the guts to be you too. Lots more information is available at CAMILJAVAC.com. Here to talk her new book, oddly enough, Standing Out When the World Begs You to Fit In, is Carolanne Miljavac. Carolanne, welcome to Revealing the Truth.
Hello, thank you for having me.
Well, it's a thrill to have you. We're glad to have you. You are famous in so many circles for being fun, goofy, kind of like my executive producer, nerdy in a special touch your heart kind of way that says that you can be odd, but you can be oddly enough. And that's kind of your message, is that the real you, the one that God made you, is perfect and wonderful, and to hide it under the covering of the world is not what He wants for you. He wants you to speak out and be bold, and you found that voice, and you found a way to reach a lot of people. So thank you for that.
Oh, thank you. You know, I like to say we're special.
Yes, we do. You know, I know a little bit about where you grew up in Walker County, Alabama, and the history behind Jasper, which is an unusual city that's a composite of not the great reputation that the world might want it to have, but yet there's a lot of great churches up in that area. What was it like growing up in Walker County, Alabama, in Jasper, Alabama, which is known more for meth labs and murder than it is probably for anything else?
It was probably exactly how people would imagine that it was, at least for our family. I always tell everyone, you know, we grew up in a trailer park on the wrong side of town, not one of the nice ones with the jacuzzi tubs and maybe a small staircase in it, but one of those that you walk by or drive by and you kind of shudder. And I'm pretty sure my neighbor was probably one of those meth lab makers that you talk of. I grew up feeling very less than. I grew up feeling like my future was pretty hopeless, and that I definitely had some things inside of me that I felt were different, and that I felt like I was called for more, but the situation, the circumstances I found myself in had me doubting any of those feelings. So it was rough. It was rough to be in that situation and feel like you might have, you know, a future, a positive future, and not a future of just ending up, you know, barefoot, pregnant, baby on the hip, and miserable. And that's kind of how I assumed my life was going to end up.
So what changed?
Well, what happened when I was younger, we were obviously very poor and we lived in poverty. And when I was about 2 years old, my dad left. He was an alcoholic, and so I'm glad he did. But he left, and so he left my mom, single mom, 3 kids to raise, all by herself, and she was working 2 or 3 jobs, just completely exhausted, tired, struggling. And when I was about 5 years old, one of my cousins touched me inappropriately, and it kind of derailed the one safe spot that I had, which was my granny's house. And it was about 3 or 4 years later where an older cousin took it one step further and molested me again. And so at that point, at 9 years old, I already identified with all kinds of strongholds of feeling dirty and gross and also guilty. And you know, these, from the time that you're a child, the enemy had his hooks in me already. He already had me feeling like, you know what, it's hopeless. There's no point. You are this, and this because this is the circumstances. And I really believed that I was to blame and at fault for things that were out of my control. And so growing up, my mom got us to church when I was about 8 years old. But she had no idea what I had gone through. I didn't tell anyone. I kept that with me. So I entered church with a lot of resentment already and a lot of anger and a lot of confusion. So she got us into church, but that didn't mean that I immediately just grasped the idea and the concept of God and faith. It really was something I struggled with, and I acted that struggle out in all kinds of self-destructive ways. I tried to throw my life away in every way you can think. And later on, I kind of describe in the middle of my life, in my 30s, what happened that sort of flipped that switch in my brain.
You know, as you were introduced into church at a young age, after what you had been through with the molestations, it would be natural for you to look at God as the author of all that and to be angry with God and hear about this loving God, but being detached from a loving God because you had seen no evidence of a loving God played out in your life. So,
yeah, well, I actually I assumed when my mom got us into church that everything was just going to get better. I thought, oh, okay, well, you know, she's got us here Wednesday night, Sunday morning, Sunday night. We were there all the time, and she's praying every night, and things are going to get better, and we're going to have some money at some point. And that just didn't happen. If anything, it seemed like things got worse and got harder over time. And so I just felt confused and like it was a waste of time. I didn't necessarily feel anger towards God or anything like that ever. I've never had that come up within me. I just felt confused all the time.
well, you start out by talking about all the knots, and your life was tied up in knots. It was not enough, and you actually asked the question, who do you think you are? When you look at you're weird, you're dirty, you're different, you're weak, you're bad, you're wrong, you're unsafe, you're hopeless, you're guilty, you're ashamed, all by the time you're 9 years old. That was how you defined yourself.
Yes. And that was based on circumstances and situations that were unfortunate that I really had no business experiencing at such a young age. And that was, you know, what the world told us. That was eye rolls and frustrated groans and moans at the grocery store when my mom had to keep taking things out of our buggy until her card would go through. It was all of those different judgments that I felt. And every time it happened, I would feel my heart just get heavier and heavier. And it kind of got to a point where I was just sort of going through the motions. And I had always been someone in my family who was really goofy and really funny and really loved to laugh, and we were a family that always laughed no matter how hard it was. And it seemed like those things were just starting to dwindle away over time as more things happened. So life was sucking the joy right out of me, and I didn't know how to have a relationship with God. I didn't really know what that meant, and I didn't know what to do about it or how that was going to change.
But this was the norm in the community that you grew up in, trailer park community, elementary school, middle schools, where your peer group and your neighbors and your friends were acting in experiencing similar things to what you were experiencing. throughout your upbringing. So although it seems not normal in the environment that you're growing up in, that was somewhat of the norm.
It actually, at the time that I was there, I went to, you probably know what I'm talking about, Maddox Middle School. I went to Park Elementary, and a lot of the people in our class were what I, saw as well off and well to do, and you still have those communities where they seem like they have it all together, and they, really they have money, and we really were kind of the outsiders. And so, being the odd one out, being the oddball, being an outsider, and not really kind of being within that crowd that as a younger kid you kind of want to be and not fitting in. That was not going to happen for me particularly. And I also didn't want to fit in with the crowd from the trailer park either. I didn't want that life either. I wanted to be able to be myself, but I didn't know who that was. And yeah, it does seem like it got worse. I'm glad my mom kind of got us out of that situation, but at the time I felt very alone.
Well, I can imagine how even in the church there was that division, that separation, that it can be almost caste-driven, where there's the haves and the have-nots, and even in youth group it's hard to blend in because of social status and popularity and all the things that kids still struggle with today from an identity standpoint of who are they and who are they supposed to be and what am I supposed to look like, and is it relative to what the other person is? How do I find my own identity? When did things really change for you as far as hearing through this loss of your niece to cancer, the poverty and abuse, that was a pretty tough, but that wasn't something you had control over. That's just the environment you grew up in. Now you had a niece who was going through something that you struggled with, and it broke your heart.
Absolutely. I think growing up, I always say there was nothing that we went through, and we went through a lot, that ever kind of humbled me enough to feel that connection and be open to it. I always tell everyone, I was 30 years old at the time, so if you would have asked me if I was a Christian, I would have said yes, absolutely. But there was no relationship. There was nothing in my life really reflecting that. I didn't pray. I didn't seek to know more. I was just sort of a sleepy Christian, I guess you would say, going through the motions. And at the time, I had two daughters, and I think getting pregnant with my first daughter definitely changed the way I was living, but it still didn't kind of give me that awakening that I had when my niece was diagnosed with cancer. I was going through the motions. Each day would come and go, and I just felt like I had lost myself. I wasn't laughing ever, and that was always a really huge part of who I was. I was just kind of trying to get through each day, and then I got the phone call that she was diagnosed. And, I think a lot of the listeners will agree, when that happens, everything else just sort of crumbles away, and you kind of no longer care about all these insignificant things you were caring about moments before. And I left to go see her immediately at St. Jude, and when I came back is when I had the moment. I went to see her, not only her, but I saw all these other children there, suffering families. What their days contained each day made me feel so ashamed of myself for not wanting to do everything I possibly could with my life and figure out what my purpose was, and then to have the courage to go after it no matter what I was feeling. So I came home and I dropped my kids off at school, and I pulled into my garage and sat in my car by myself, which is where I get all my best thoughts. It's where I connect usually with God as well. I think it's just my space. We all have our own little space that we do well in. Mine's my car. And I wasn't praying. I wasn't seeking God at all. I was just really upset. I was just sad. I was swallowed up with grief. And but he sought me in that moment. You know, I think what I always say is he's always there. He's not to be found. He's always there. But I think a lot of the time we are just so distracted by everything else that we can't see him and we can't feel him. And in that moment, I had nothing distracting me. And I completely felt his presence. And the crazy thing is he kind of took my grief away in that moment. And I had a lot of what I later found out was fruits of the Spirit given to me, where I just knew what I was supposed to do. He told me to give it up and to speak. I had no idea what that was going to mean. I didn't know what speak meant. I just knew that if that's what he said I was going to do, that's what I was going to do. And so we would just see what happened. And over the next 3 years, he completely blew my mind with the possibilities of where he could take my life.
Where was your husband during all this while he was observing this transformation of his wife? I mean, certainly your mother, wife, did he know of your internal battles? Did he share that with you? What was his faith journey parallel to yours? Was he a believer? Was he not a believer? Did this kind of pull him into the picture?
Yeah, well, I honestly, up until that point, still had so many things I was harboring that I didn't open up about with anybody, that I didn't share with anyone. So it was probably quite the change, you know, for him as well. I told everyone, including my family, what I was feeling in my heart. And I think the devastation of what was happening with my niece kind of opened everybody up. And so it's been 4 years of continued growth and learning and steps forward and steps back. And but it's been such a fun journey, I think, for everyone to just be able to witness what happens, you know, when someone says, this is what God has put into my heart and I'm choosing to believe it. And then to sit back and actually watch him fulfill his promises has been amazing, I think, for everybody.
You know, your following on the internet is extraordinary. You've found your sense of humor again. Do you attribute this, that even in the loss of this precious niece, who you have dedicated the book to, that you have kept her memory alive and wanting to bring joy even in the face of tragedy, has become contagious within your own home?
Yes, absolutely. You know, when she was at the hospital, the only thing I ever seemed to feel good for growing up and anytime times were hard was to be the comic relief, and that's from the time I was a child. So in the moments where we were at the hospital and I felt pretty useless, I was able to make her smile. And at the time, she was really kind of having a depression. It was her first week of being diagnosed. She didn't know how to comprehend what was happening with her. And I was able to make her laugh. I was able to be really silly and goofy and get her to smile. And I realized how important that is, how important it is to be able to laugh in those moments, just to have that relief and momentary peace that laughter brings. And it reminded me what a gift that is. And then it dawned on me that that was a really big gift that God had given me and that I had been using it since I was little, but just didn't realize it. And so I wanted to pass that on. And I just made this decision to be who I am. And if that includes the goofy side, then that includes the goofy side, and to put that out there for the world. And if I made even one person laugh, it'd be worth it. And I guess God was right when he said I was funny. So it caught on a little bit.
You know, what's interesting about your story is that the average person, tragedy defeats them. And in your case, tragedy defined you because it released you. It allowed you to face what you had gone through as a child and were now able to be open about it. It also was an opportunity for you to process your grief and find this expression that was going to say that, kind of like what Paul says. He says, we may be sick, but we are healed. We may be poor, but we have been made rich. All those things that the natural tells us we are this or that we're not, but the Lord tells that we are, and this is how He sees it and how He sees us. And this was transformational for you. We're talking with Carolanne Miljavac, author of Oddly Enough, Standing Out When the World Begs You to Fit In. It doesn't take tragedy in everybody's life to be the catalyst to finding yourself, but it took tragedy in Carolanne's life for God to finally reach her heart and open up a heart of joy. God's Word says laughter is wonderful medicine. It's medicine to the bones, and she's found a way that during her walk with the Lord to bring joy and humor into a loving relationship with God that's available for each and every one of us. You know, the Word of God says that Jesus came to bind up the brokenhearted and set the captives free. Carolanne had been captive to her circumstances. She had lost her joy, but yet God will use new life to come out of death. The seed must die in order for the new life to come forward. We too must die to ourselves in order for the new life to come forward. And out of the passing of a precious 7-year-old niece comes the story and a tribute to Ansley Abigail Smith that's going to delight you, that's going to touch your heart, that's going to break your heart, and then fill you with laughter as you read Oddly Enough, Standing Out When the World Begs You to Fit In. We're going to take a short break, and when we come back, we're going to dig into more of this story with Carolanne Miljavac. We'll be right back. Shalom, I'm the Reverend Rabbi Eric Walker, and I've got a question for you. What do you think they're doing with your DNA? Oh, you know that 23andMe kit that you sent off, and you got back that report that told you you were Irish, you were French, you were Jewish? Wonder who's interested in that information. It's not like you've sent it off to a database with millions of other people and they can steal your identity, and who would really be interested in that information other than you? Well, maybe your friends and family, but there's one, yes, one who is so interested in your DNA that it would be something that would make you afraid. And that is Satan himself. Why would Satan be interested in your DNA? Because there is a Y chromosome marker that determines whether or not you are in the line of Aaron. That's right, the biblical line of Aaron the priest. That's because if the priesthood comes back and the high priest takes his role as the head of the Sanhedrin, they will be the ones to call for the return of Jesus. Well, what can they do with your DNA? Well, there are 40-plus countries weaponizing DNA today. And imagine if Satan could weaponize your DNA and use that Y chromosome marker to take out the line of the high priest, then Jesus doesn't come back. That is the plot behind the best-selling book, The Codex, now out in second edition on Kindle, $2.99, also available in paperback. This is a biblical thriller beyond comparison that's going to take you on an incredible journey to understand what they could do with your DNA. I also want to encourage you to visit our website, ignitinganation.com, and click on special offers. There you're going to find the yellow cover of this book, The 7 Laws of Abundant Living, Lessons Learned from the Tree of Life. We're going to take you on a journey in the Garden of Eden to the seed, the ground, all the way out to the fruit that reveals things of the natural that God is trying to reveal supernatural truths. Contained within these pages are 7 laws and 7 lessons within each law. They're going to take you on an incredible journey of understanding about the life you live and the fruit you bear. I want to encourage you to click on that yellow cover. We're going to ask for your email. Now, we won't send you spam because spam is not kosher, but we will send you the first chapter of this book. I want to encourage you to get 7 Laws of Abundant Living, Lessons Learned from the Tree of Life. You can get it on Amazon. You can get it on Barnes & Noble. You can get it at Books A Million, wherever great Christian books are sold. Take this journey with me to the Tree of Life in the Garden of Eden and to the Tree of Life we see again at the River of Life. Get your copy today. Shalom, I'm the Reverend Rabbi Eric Walker, and I've got a question for you. What do you think they're doing with your DNA? Oh, you know that 23andMe kit that you sent off and you got back that report that told you you were Irish, you were French, you were Jewish? Wonder who's interested in that information. It's not like you've sent it off to a database with millions of other people and they can steal your identity, and who would really be interested in that information other than you? Well, maybe your friends and family, but there's one, yes, one who is so interested in your DNA that it would be something that would make you afraid. And that is Satan himself. Why would Satan be interested in your DNA? Because there is a Y chromosome marker that determines whether or not you are in the line of Aaron. That's right, the biblical line of Aaron the priest. That's because if the priesthood comes back and the high priest takes his role as the head of the Sanhedrin, they will be the ones to call for the return of Jesus. Well, what can they do with your DNA? Well, there are 40-plus countries weaponizing DNA today. And imagine if Satan could weaponize your DNA and use that Y chromosome marker to take out the line of the high priest, then Jesus doesn't come back. That is the plot behind the best-selling book, The Codus, now out in second edition on Kindle, $2.99, also available in paperback. This is a biblical thriller beyond comparison that's going to take you on an incredible journey to understand what they could do with your DNA. I also want to encourage you to visit our website, ignitingnation.com, and click on special offers. There you're going to find the yellow cover of this book, The 7 Laws of Abundant Living, Lessons Learned from the Tree of Life. We're going to take you on a journey in the Garden of Eden to the seed, the ground, all the way out to the fruit that reveals things of the natural that God is trying to reveal supernatural truths. Contained within these pages are 7 laws and 7 lessons within each law. They're going to take you on an incredible journey of understanding about the life you live and the fruit you bear. I want to encourage you to click on that yellow cover. We're going to ask for your email. Now, we won't send you spam because spam is not kosher, but we will send you the first chapter of this book. I want to encourage you to get 7 Laws of Abundant Living, Lessons Learned from the Tree of Life. You can get it on Amazon. You can get it on Barnes & Noble. You can get it at Books A Million, wherever great Christian books are sold. Take this journey with me to the Tree of Life in the Garden of Eden and to the Tree of Life we see again at the River of Life. Get your copy today. Shalom and welcome back to this edition of Revealing the Truth, where we cover the headlines, the heart lines, and biblical truth. I'm your host, the Reverend Rabbi Eric Walker, and we're talking with Carolanne Miljavac, author of Oddly Enough, Standing Out When the World Begs You to Fit In. Carolanne, welcome back to Revealing the Truth.
I'm so happy to be here.
Carolanne, let's talk a little bit about the book. We've gotten a background on you. We send people to really the website. How would you say it? Miljavac?
Miljavac, you nailed it.
Yeah, Miljavac.
It's Miljavac.
So
it's not kill. It's just, it's Miljavac. No kill in there.
But the CA. So,
CA Miljavac.
Yeah, CA Miljavac. Okay,
yes.
So Miljavac. They can catch all your videos. And your YouTube channel is what?
It's the same. Everything is CA Miljavac.
Okay, CA Miljavac. All right. So because you have such a following, and I've watched some of them, they're comical, they're insightful, they're provocative, they challenge you to think deeper. But in the book that you wrote, Standing Out When the World Begs You to Fit In, I think we're all familiar with this conformity message, compliance message, that the world is trying to get us to fit into a box. But you and I both look at that and say, you know, why get in the box when there's so much room outside the box? And why color within the lines when there's a much bigger piece of paper outside the lines than there is? You talk about, in one of your chapters called Control Freak, you kind of give us some insight. Tell us about that chapter.
Control Freak's one of my favorite chapters because my entire life I was always trying to be in control of my circumstances. And at the time that we talked about when I went to see my niece, and at the time that she was battling cancer, I was in a place in my life where I was trying my best to force my way to success. And I have a tendency to be antsy. I want to try to move and make something happen, and then I try to force it and make and pretend that everything's going to be okay. And I was so exhausted by the time that I gave my life to God. I just knew that what he wanted me to do was let him have my life. And I had never understood before what that looked like or what that meant. And really what it meant was just this huge release of weight and just giving me guidance and letting me be open to discern what steps I was supposed to take. And sometimes I felt like I had no idea if I was doing that. But it didn't matter if I strayed off the path he had me on, because he always got me back where I needed to be. And if I got off the path, he would just teach me something while I was out there and then give me a door to spread whatever he taught me to teach that lesson to whoever, I could. And so it's oddly enough, it was about a year after my niece actually passed away, and I was still trying to walk in faith and believe what he had spoke to me, which was that I was going to speak. And I was also at times trying to force my way into that, trying to guess what that meant. And it was a whole year later that he showed me what that meant. And it was a Dance Like Nobody's Watching challenge. And I decided to really go for it and not just do the typical, what most people do when they're doing those kinds of things. And so with my toddler crying like a dying cat in the background and almost choking on my spit and dying in the middle of it, I was just in all my glory, and I put it all out there. And then I hit post online and let everyone see it. And it was the most vulnerable thing I've ever done. I didn't want to do it. But one of the things that I knew in my heart was that if I was going to give up control, that meant if he told me to do something, I had to do it no matter what. Whether my flesh wanted to do it or not, I just had to leap and trust him. So even though I didn't really want to post it, it kept coming up. You need to post that. You need to put that out there. So I did. And then within an hour, my mom was calling me, telling me I was going to be on Ellen, and everyone was flipping out, and it went viral. And all of a sudden, I was given this platform to do exactly what he had promised me a year earlier that I would do. And since then, he's just continued to expand that opportunity, from live feeds and videos to speaking engagements, stand-up comedy, like we talked about, but also to now writing this book and being able to pour all of my heart and soul into a book in print, where if I was to leave this earth tomorrow, I would have left that behind. And Ansley was always the inspiration for all of that. And so giving up control meant trust. And trust was not something that came easy to me the way that I grew up. But in trusting him in the last 3 years, he has done more with my life than I could have even dreamed up myself.
Do you find yourself compelled to include honoring God in what you're doing, or is it naturally there and it naturally flows? Because we know that which is quote unquote Christian seems to be off-putting to many, and may narrow the scope of the influence or the sphere of influence you might have. But you are not shy about whose you are, and you find that are you getting comments? Are you getting posts which are addressing that aspect of it?
Yes, absolutely. One of the things that I said in my car that day that I gave my life to him was that I didn't care anymore what anyone thought. And I said, if he gave me a platform, I'd give him the glory. And it is, I will say, it can be very scary when you're in front of millions of people, because it's not the popular thing. And at times I don't really feel like I fit in on either side of the scope. And I think that's why the message that I have is so important, though, is for anyone to understand that you can be used as a vessel no matter where you come from, no matter if you fit into the mold that maybe you feel is what a Christian mold is supposed to look like. I can't help but give him the praise he deserves, because everything happening in my life right now is for no other reason than he said it would if I trusted him. And I can't take that away from him or hide that. And I truly feel like that is my purpose on earth. So whether it costs me popularity points or not, I'm going to do it. Whether it boosts me up on the judgment podium a little more, I'm just going to have to suffer that. I've gotten harsh criticisms from unbelievers and believers because I am a little different, oddly enough, for the purpose he gave me. And I always tell everyone, if you have an issue with me being used for his glory, you'll just have to take it up with him, because it was his decision. So.
Well, this kind of leads us into turning chains into reins, which is it's a very interesting twist and turn on understanding how God has given us this incredible ability to take what are seemingly strongholds and turning them into strengthholds. And
Yes.
Talk about this chapter, turning chains into reins, because it really is a profound truth that people don't get. They don't see it. They see the chains, but they don't see the reins.
Yeah, this chapter sets my whole soul on fire. I love this chapter so much because, to me, it is so exciting and freeing to know that no matter what you go through in life, if you trust God and give it to him, at some point he will take it and use it and manipulate it into something that not only can be used for your good, but for the good of others. And I think that's such a big theme of it, is the minute that you decide to give up control and live for others and live for God, now he's going to be able to take the things that you go through and benefit others. It's always about other people. It's never about you. It's always about how you can spread that message to others. And chains into reins is, there's not a single thing. I couldn't see it at the time while I was going through something hard, while I was being molested, while I was living in poverty, while I was being bullied, when my niece was suffering from cancer. In that moment, I couldn't possibly understand what good could come from that. But in the future, I'm able to look back and see how he was able to take that and if I would let him use that for some good. And being molested taught me forgiveness. It gave me a character of compassion and grace. And living in poverty makes me a more grateful person for the things that I have right now. And experiencing what I did with Ansley and that suffering and that grief gives me a message of laughter after loss that I feel is incredibly needed and important. Because there is no such thing as a person on earth who hasn't experienced grief and loss. And I think that loss is probably one of the greatest tests of a person's faith. And I was able to take what I'd been through and shift that perspective and show you how, bad things are going to happen. We live in a fallen world and we can't get around it. But if you're willing and if you'll let him love you, he will show you how to build that character from whatever it is you've been through and love others with it. And then he can use you as a vessel. And that's really the beautiful part of it. That's the part that's exciting, because then you don't really have to fear. Then you can laugh without fear. You don't have to worry about what's going to happen tomorrow or a year from now. You just have to know that you're loved and nothing's going to change that. And that makes me so excited. And that's a message I absolutely love sharing.
There's a lot of people out there that want to give up on God because they think God gave up on them, or that things don't turn out the way they expected them to, and therefore this is not the God who meets our expectations. And so we wind up having this kind of skewed view of who God is and what God created us to be. If you're struggling with your relationship with God, it's because you're coming up against this battle. Your war against God turns into a war against your friends, a war against your family. You find yourself at odds. It always goes back to this God conflict in trying to understand clearly that God does have a plan and it does not have to look like your plan in order to be a good plan. You suffered through great grief and loss only to discover a wonderful, love-filled life, laughter, and joy-filled life, even in loss. And it was the loss that was the catalyst. It was that which launched you to the taking down the barriers, stripping it down to nothing. Okay, Lord, everything that I thought was important is gone. Everything that was of value to me is gone. The life that I cherished so much in this child is gone. What is left? And this is where he said, what's left? What's left is this little bit, and I want you to give it up too. Because when I've got you down to nothing, I then will rebuild you the way I want to rebuild you. And it's going to be fun, it's going to be freeing, and it's going to touch more lives than you can ever possibly imagine. And you don't have to do anything but be you, the way I made you. How freeing is that for you, and how freeing is that for your audience?
It's a freedom that they see when they see me laughing with such, there's nothing holding me back, from it. And I think I think anytime you're filled with the Spirit on something, it seeps out of you and people can't help but feel it. And, do I wish that I didn't have to learn all these things but with the loss of a child in our family? Absolutely. But the one thing I know is that we're not going to get her back. That was always going to be her life story. And I have two choices. And it's either be angry and hateful and wallow in grief and let that seep out of me onto everyone around me, or take her life and do something good with it and leave a legacy behind in her name and her honor. And, she taught me to laugh again. She showed me how someone so young could be suffering and faithful at the same time. And I walked away from that experience so inspired. And I want her story to be told. I wanted everyone to know that you can go through hard times in life and still laugh and still have joy and peace. And just because I have it right now doesn't mean I don't have days where I am overwhelmed with sadness. But what I've learned now is that part of giving it up means allowing yourself to feel the things you're feeling. And anyone who's grieving, I would tell them to cry, to not avoid feeling the pain. You have to feel the pain that's associated with what you've suffered through in order to let it go. But once you let it go, you can lift your head up and you can walk away and you can use it to light that fire and encourage you and inspire you to go out there and make the most of what time you have on this earth. And if anything, her short little 7 years really lit a fire in me to make the most of every second I'm going to get out of mine, because I don't know how long it's going to be. And it's taught me a lot about death and how unavoidable it is. And instead, I choose joy. I choose joy. It's a choice. We do have a choice. And you're allowed to be sad. You're allowed to be angry at God. You can have those emotions. He's okay with it. He's still there with open arms, ready to embrace you and love you and show you, how to use that as soon as you're ready. So I also wanted people to know that I'm coming from a place of understanding. I understand how you feel. I understand why you feel that way, and so does God. And He's going to be there ready and waiting for you when you're ready to move forward. And so there's hope. There's always hope, and there's always joy to be had. And it definitely surpasses all understanding, and people don't know what to do with it.
One of the messages, which is an underlying theme throughout the book, is you have to know who you are at every stage of your life. That you have to really be able to weigh into the moment, embrace the moment, and find God in the moment. He says, "Seek me and I will be found." And if you don't know who you are, if you're lost in the moment, then you're really lost. If you're lost in the circumstances, you're really lost. if you've let go of the one who grabbed a hold of you, then you really are lost. And so it's important to continue to reset and establish yourself in the season that you're in your relationship with God. It's not stagnant. It's not that just, okay, now I'm a believer, I have a relationship with God, and everything's all flat-lined at this point. That's not the case at all, and that's not a part of your message.
No, not at all, because, at 30 years old, when I gave my life to God, I still had so much growing to do, so much learning. And I never wanted to be someone that anybody put on a pedestal or looked to be this pillar of perfection or example, because I think people tend to do that, put people on pedestals. And what happens is if you do that, you're always going to be disappointed, because people are flawed. We're flawed human beings. And I think the thing about my message that has grabbed on to so many people is that I am so open and transparent about how imperfect I am in this journey. I have days where I am just full of the light of the Lord and loving everybody and able to overlook anything. And then I have days where I clearly want to punch people in the face. Like we all have a flesh always, and sometimes mine wins. And the thing that I've been able to do with it, the way God has been able to say, you know what? We're going to use that flaw of yours and we're going to twist it into something that can bring people joy. So I take those moments where my flesh wins and I make fun of myself and I make jokes about it. And I use that as my source of humor, and so to me, it's just so exciting knowing that there's really nothing you can do that he cannot morph into something good. And that means your worst day can turn into a message, always. And so you don't have to be, afraid of that worst day. You can embrace it, and you can embrace being imperfect. And there's so many people out there who are questioning whether or not they're worthy of loving God. And not only loving him, but loving him out loud. Opening their mouth and saying, I love Jesus and I love God. Because they're afraid that if they say it out loud, now they're held to some higher standard that they might not be able to live up to. And if anything, I'm just bravely putting that out there that I do love him with all my heart and what he's done in my life, and I still mess up sometimes.
Well, you say it very clearly in the description of your YouTube channel. Nobody's perfect. Inspiration is found in the struggles, and I've got plenty. I live out my purpose through my passion, faith, fitness, motivation, and laughter. And that kind of sums up who you are and sums up the message of your book. For those who are out there struggling to kind of break out the same way you did when you were, one of your videos that is a popular one is you trying to do something and salt and pepper comes out on out over the airways, and you just break into just
Twerking.
dance. Well, that's it. Biblical twerking, which is
what it was.
is exactly when you're trying to work out, but salt and pepper comes on, and this is kind of a signature for you of busting a move for the Lord.
Yeah, which didn't go over well with everybody. But I don't know what to tell you. He works in mysterious ways. That was the one that kind of was the catalyst to showing people who I was and giving them an opportunity to hear my message. And I don't know if I would do that again, but that's I always twerked in sweatpants. And so, I was having fun. I was having a good time.
So the message that you have for the audience is in about a minute and a half. Just talk right to our audience and let them know exactly what you want them to take away from this.
I want anyone who is struggling right now, wandering in the wilderness, as you know, the Bible says, with wondering what your purpose is, wondering what the point is, and whatever it is you're going through, or just feeling like you're not good enough for your life, for love, to be safe, to be happy, to have joy, or to laugh. I want you to know that that is a lie, and that you have a choice to make. You are not at fault for what's been done to you or what you've been put through, but you do have responsibility for what you do in response to it. And starting today, you can start to choose to make a healthier, happier response. And it's not too late. I was in my 30s when I discovered God's purpose for me and just began walking in faith little by little. So it's not too late for you to do the same. You are loved. You are enough. You are worthy of His love. He died for you for a reason. You're here for a purpose. And I want everyone to know without a shadow of a doubt that you are absolutely enough for whatever the calling is on your life. And you've been shaped in a unique way that only you could be for the exact purpose you were created for.
Tell our audience again where they can find you online.
C.A. Miljavac, Miljavac.
Okay, just like your name, Carolanne Miljavac, author of Oddly Enough, Standing Out When the World Begs You to Fit In. You don't have to go through what she went through in order to come out the other side, but you do have to journey to the other side and grab a hold of the one who had given his life and wants to grab a hold of you. What you contend with, also God's heart contends with, and you can do it with somberness or you can do it with joy, as Carolanne has done, and bring laughter back into your faith and rejoice and truly find a way to rejoice. Carolanne Miljavac, thank you so much for sharing your story here with us on Revealing the Truth.
Thank you so much for having me.
God bless you. We're going to take a short break, and when we return, we'll bring you the next edition of Revealing the Truth.